Leo the Lion. And it's about Leo we're talking tonight, or rather about Leo's master, an appropriate word if ever there were one, a man with a very similar name, called, not Leo, but Louis, the boss of MGM, one of the men who really made Hollywood.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain, just singing, singing in the rain.
Good evening, I'm Michael Friedland with the last of our portraits of the men who made fortunes at the same time as making our own lives that much more exciting.
I'm happy again.
The people who put moving images on blank screens and, as a result, had us leaving cinemas all over the world ready to dance down the street on the way to a number 8 bus. Do you remember that line from Singing in the Rain? The one in which a scatty blonde spoke of her happiness in bringing a little joy into our humdrum lives. Well, that's what the Hollywood musical did. Ask almost anybody to name the one scene and the one song that epitomizes the musical, and the one they're going to choose is the Gene Kelly Singing in the Rain routine, in which he went splashing around in the puddles of some Hollywood movie set. It's a scene which always gets a round of applause as Gene hands his umbrella to the grateful passerby and disappears down the road.
I'm dancing and singing in the rain.
Ask almost anyone who knows almost anything about movies which studio produced that epoch-making film, and they'll tell you it was MGM. MGM, the studio whose initials stood for Makers of Great Musicals. Well, I like to think that they did. Actually, as if you didn't know, they stood for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And the man behind it all was the one with the last of those names, Louis B. Mayer.
Mayer, of course, ran the Metro-Goldwyn studios like a fiefdom, and they had, as they said in their brochures and advertising, more stars than in the heavens, and which they very nearly did. And they had a fantastic stock company, so-called, so that they were always in a position to make pictures with important casting.
The view of one of the great names of Hollywood, Hal Wallis, sometime production head at the rival Warner Brothers studio, but a man who knew them all. And so did Sammy Cahn, the songwriter who in his time worked for practically all the men who made Hollywood.
The top man was, of course, Louis B. Mayer, L.B. And I guess what made him the top man was that he had the most power. And he had the largest studio. It was really a kingdom. When you drove through the Metro-Goldwyn studio gates, you actually went into a kingdom. And he was the ruler of this kingdom and ruled it with the absolute power. You know, by the stroke of a pen or the snap of a finger, a career could be made or stopped.
Sammy Cahn talking about the man whom he said was king of MGM. The musicals were, of course, an integral part of MGM, but not the only part. This, after all, was the studio that began life producing the first version of Ben-Hur, and the second one too. And under Louis B. Mayer went on to make Grand Hotel, Mutiny on the Bounty, David Copperfield, Goodbye Mr. Chips, and Father of the Bride. These, along with the great comedies of the Marx Brothers, the glamour of Clark Gable and Greta Garbo, the sublime acting of Spencer Tracy and James Stewart, they're the way MGM ought to be remembered. It was the studio which, as we heard before, had a sign under which everyone who entered its empire at Culver City had to pass. Here are more stars than there are in the heavens. But it was the musical heaven in which those stars shone most brightly.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Judy Garland, of course, an important feature in the musical saga, but more than that. She, after all, summed up the perfect Hollywood childhood. The girl in the Andy Hardy stories, which Louis B. Mayer regarded as the greatest contribution he made to America. The tales of the perfect American family, more of which in a minute. Judy Garland's co-star in those was Mickey Rooney. Billy Wilder happened to overhear a conversation that Mayer had with his impish protege.
We had worked at Metro only once. Mr. Brackett and I were on a loan to MGM. We were working on the script for Mr. Lubitsch, Ninochka. And en passant, I would meet him, and I would just, sometimes I saw him through the window. He would be talking to Mickey Rooney, and I overheard kind of things. He says, "You are Andy Hardy, you are the American flag. I don't want to see you drinking again. You are the spirit of America. You are what this country is." Kind of really flag waving and patriotic.
That love of America was in its way endemic among the Hollywood moguls. Men like Louis, or Lazar to be accurate, the name that would have appeared on his birth certificate had he had one, men who were born in Russia, came to the United States as children, and were forever afterwards grateful for the life that their adopted country gave them. Adopted? Well, for Louis B., the initial B was added later in life. For Louis B. Mayer and the others, America was adopted by them. It was always a rather large hunk of paradise, dropped down between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And Mayer was the most patriotic of them all. Cynics could say that it was all part of a widescreen inferiority complex that Mayer had when in the company of the WASP American-born people who fawned on him, more for his money and power than for any other more respectable reasons. It was probably that money and that power that led them to make him chairman of the Republican Party of California, which you might have thought was as all-American, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant as you could get. And not bad for a man who specified that his luxury dining room had every day to serve him with a plate of the kosher-style chicken soup made to his mother's recipe. But if you think that made him a nice, soft man with homespun attitudes to life, listen again to Sammy Khan.
He was kind of a harsh man. I remember never seeing him walk with anybody. In other words, be it his wife or an associate, they were a couple of paces behind him.
Because you're mine, the brightest star I see looks down my love and envies me. Because you're mine, because you're mine, because you're mine, the breeze that hurries by becomes a melody. And because you're mine, because you're mine, I only know for as long as I may live, I'll only live for the kiss that you alone may give me. And when we kiss, that isn't thunder, dear. It's only my poor heart you hear, and it's applause because you're mine.
The Sammy Khan title song from a 1952 MGM musical. And if you think about it, that pretty well sums up the attitude of Louis B. Mayer. People did what they were told by Mr. Mayer, if you couldn't bring yourself to call him Your Majesty, because as far as they were concerned, they were his. Not just his employees, his contract players, but members of his family. But to join that family, you had to have one quality: talent. Producer George Sidney.
He was one of the most dynamic figures that the motion picture business has ever known, and the business world of this country and the entire world has ever known. He was a great gambler. He gambled on the films. He gambled on people. He believed in developing his talents. I know he took me from the age of 14 and let me run around the studio, blow out the lights in the studio and blow out this and that, to fall down and pick myself up. He did that with so many people. The reason I enjoyed making tests, we made thousands and millions because he was always looking for quality. I know in my very early filmmakings, he came down the set one day and he called me aside. He said, "Boy, how is it coming?" I said, "Well," I said, "it's coming pretty good, I think, Mr. Mayer." I said, "But they're driving me crazy because they're screaming I'm a day or so behind or something." And he said, "Look," he said, "are you getting what you want?" I said, "Yes, I'm getting what I want." He said, "You're getting your close-ups?" And I said, "Yes, I'm getting all that, and I'm satisfied." He said, "Well, don't say that I told you." And he said, "If you repeat it, I'll say I never said it." He said, "But you just go make your picture and let them worry about the schedule." Now, that was the man who owned the studio. And that was typical of Mr. Mayer, that anything that had quality, he reached for.
George Sidney. In 1950, when the studio celebrated its 25th anniversary, Louis B. Mayer held a family party for the people he regarded as his children, with everyone from Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner to Greer Garson, Elizabeth Taylor and Van Johnson, sitting down for dinner at long trestle tables while the cameras snapped. They needed 6 of those tables, and a bowl in the corner for a very special member of that family, Lassie. The dog, of course, fitted in beautifully as part of that all-American family. Mayer was offended if his children weren't happy enough at the studio to show due deference to him. especially if they threaten to leave the nest. Here is the eminent director of the MGM silent movie The Big Parade, King Vidor, talking about the horror, as Mayer thought of it, of such a move.
He's very adroit and very clever the way he got people to stay on when they wanted to leave, simply by using the family idea and the son and daughter idea, and he was the papa. He would talk them out of it when they wanted to go. So they had about 50 stars, and they must have had 25 directors. They made 50 films a year. So it was all the power and the scheming and the planning of Louis B. Mayer.
Sometimes, though, the tables were reversed. The time came when actors would then experience what was known in the trade as the crying scene. Like Joan Crawford, who was summoned into the plush, all-white office of the great man, given tea in an almost totally transparent china cup, and told, "Joan, darling, you know how much I love you." "Yes, Mr. Mayer." "And darling Joan, we've been together for so long. You really are my daughter." "Yes, Mr. Mayer." At this point, the silk handkerchief is removed from his breast pocket. "And you know, darling, I would do anything for you." "Yes, Mr. Mayer." "But, darling, we have a problem, and I need you to help me with it." "Anything, Mr. Mayer." "You're fired." And then there was Robert Taylor. Listen now to MGM composer Bronislaw Kaper.
Robert Taylor, after he was kind of a little actor, became a star. So his friends told him, "Listen, you have to go to Louis B. Mayer and ask for a raise. Tell him you're a star now. You're underpaid." So Robert Taylor, great fear, went to Louis B. Mayer, made an appointment. Mr. Mayer's office was very big, and the desk was at the very end, like in those strange movies. So the trip from the door to his desk, already you lost guts. By walking, you say, "What am I going to say? What am I going to tell him?" So Taylor came and says, "Mr. Mayer, I'm sorry," already apologizing. He was already sorry he walked in. And he said, "I used to be a contract player. Now that I'm a star, and I think that I should be paid more money. I should get a raise." And now Louis Mayer says, "Robert, let me tell you something. If I were your father, and you would come to me and says, 'Father, I'm going to go to Louis B. Mayer and ask for a raise,' I would tell you, 'Son, don't do that. Because business is not very good. We might lose European market. Pictures are not doing as much money as before.' And I would say, 'Son, don't go. Wait. Maybe things will settle down. Then I will be the first to tell you, as your father, to go to Mr. Louis B. Mayer, and I'm sure you get a raise then.'" So Robert Taylor says, "Thank you, Mr. Mayer," bowed a few times and left. Now his friends were waiting. Said, "You get a raise?" He says, "No, but I got a father."
Frank Sinatra was called one day, ever so politely, in for tea. It seems that Frank was overheard in the studio commissary telling Gene Kelly that the reason Mayer had a broken arm was not because he'd fallen off his horse, as everyone had been told. He'd fallen off his mistress. Yes, Mr. Mayer, Mr. Righteous Louis B. Mayer, upholder of the sanctity of marriage and the American family, used his office couch for more than just cosy tea parties. But it was to one of those that Frank thought he'd been invited. "Frank, my darling boy," said Frank, "you're like a son to me." "I know that, Mr. Mayer." "And I think I've always treated you like a father." "Yes, you've always been very nice to me, Mr. Mayer." And here the handkerchief comes out again. "I love you so much, Frank. There isn't a thing I wouldn't do for you." "Thank you so much, Mr. Mayer. But you leave the studio at 3 o'clock. And don't come back."
Isn't she a beauty? Isn't she a queen? Nicest bridge that I have ever seen. Her paint's a little tattered where age has left its touch. Still Well, I guess I'll always love her very much. Like the folks you meet on, like to plant my feet on the Brooklyn Bridge. What a lovely view from heaven looks at you from the Brooklyn Bridge. I love to listen to the wind through her strings, the song that it sings for the town. I love to look up at the clouds in her hair. She's learned to wear like a crown. If you've been a rover, journey's end lies over the Brooklyn Bridge. Don't let no one tell you that I've been trying to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. All the folks in Manhattan are sad, 'cause they look at her and wish they had the good old Brooklyn Bridge.
Frank Sinatra's Brooklyn Bridge from the MGM movie It Happened in Brooklyn. Actually, not for Louis B. Mayer, it didn't. He may have entered the New World via from Russia, but his formative years were spent in St. John, New Brunswick in Canada, where his father became quite a successful junk dealer, something that they would never say about Louis B. Mayer. Lazar, before he became Louis, followed in his father's footsteps, but took matters a stage further by becoming a scrap metal dealer. He didn't like it much, and by the time he'd settled in Boston, decided to look for other, more interesting, cleaner occupations, like owning a vaudeville theatre in Haverhill, Massachusetts, which was called the Gem. Unfortunately, the locals knew it as the Germ. But the germ of the business he entered was firmly flowing through his bloodstream. He loved the theatre, the girls, the male dancers, the girls, the magicians and acrobats, and the girls, the comedians and the girls, and especially the comedians.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said, be an actor, my son, but be a comical one. They'll be standing in lines for those old honky-tonk monkey shines. Or you could study Shakespeare and be quite elite, and you could charm the critics and have nothing to eat. Just slip on a banana peel, the world's at your feet. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My grandpa said go out and tell 'em a joke, but give it plenty of hope. Make 'em roar, make 'em scream. Take a fall, but a wall, split a seam. You start off by pretending you're a dancer with grace. You wiggle till they're giggling all over the place, and then you get a great big custard pie in the face. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh.
This is Michael Friedland telling on Radio 2 the story of Louis B. Mayer, one of the men who made Hollywood.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said, be an actor, my son, but be a comical one. They'll be standing in lines for those old honky-tonk monkey shines. Or you could study Shakespeare and be quite elite. And you could charm the critics and have nothing to eat. Just slip on a banana peel, the world's at your feet. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh.
Another number from Singing in the Rain, a film that just wouldn't have been possible in the days when Louis B. Mayer first went into the movie business in 1911, 16 years before sound came to the cinema. And come to think of it, making him laugh was quite the last thing you could expect of Louis B. Mayer, although he didn't exactly cry on the way to the bank in which he deposited the weekly takings. The 1,600-seat Colonial Theatre in Haverhill was built by Mayer specifically to show what he called high-class films as well as vaudeville acts. And 2 more theatres followed. Then he went into the business of distributing films, starting with securing the rights to D.W. Griffith's huge and now highly controversial The Birth of a Nation. The birth of Mayer's own nation, or his film production company, came 2 years later, when he formed his Metro Pictures Corporation, making a film called Virtuous Wives, which was perhaps more up his street than a film that could be called Virtuous Husbands. But Metro and he parted company, and Louis B. Mayer formed his own firm. Then in 1923, Metro merged with the original Goldwyn studio, without, as we heard a couple of weeks ago, Sam Goldwyn himself. Although Leo the Lion was actually the Goldwyn logo in those long-forgotten silent movies. It had all been the dream of a Metro publicist named Howard Dietz, later most famous for writing lyrics for great songs featured in, well, great MGM musicals, like this one from The Bandwagon.
When you feel as low as the bottom of a well and can't get out of the mood, do something to perk yourself up and change your attitude. Give a tug to your tie, put a crease in your pants. But if you really want to feel fine, give your shoes a shine. When there's a shine on your shoes, there's a melody in your heart with a singable happy feeling. A wonderful way to start to face the world every day with the dee-da-dee-da-da. Little melody that is making the worrying world go by. When you walk down the street with the happy-go-lucky beat, you'll find a lot
He
in what
brought Mayer back in the picture. And guess what? The studio became Metro Goldwyn Mayer. There were, however, people who had a new definition of the MGM letters, and they weren't referring to that suggestion that they stood for makers of great musicals. Sammy Khan again.
MGM, Mayer's ganze Mishpacha, it used to be. You know what that means? Mayer's, M, ganze means total, Mishpacha, family, MGM.
There was one other motto that the people in the film business adopted on behalf of Louis B. Mayer, which says almost the same thing about the man who invented Hollywood nepotism. The son-in-law also rises. The son-in-law in question was the husband of his daughter Irene, the eminent producer David O. Selznick. George Sidney knew them both.
David was an actual producer. He would get a piece of material and follow it through, and he was very strong on a script. He would work with the script. That's the difference. Mr. Mayer never worked with the script or anything else. He just would okay and feel the idea, and he might find a soft spot. He said, well, I don't think that's quite the right thing. The mother wouldn't do this. And where do I cry? He knew the basics. And when they would read a script to Mr. Mayer, he'd say, who plays heavy? And they said, this part over here, Charlie. So, well, could Wallace Beery, would who did that? And who is a good fellow? Well, would Clark be that? Bob Taylor? Who would be, and he would try to visualize. And he was doing where David Selznick did the actual work of the scripts.
David O. Selznick was, of course, one of the great names in the Hollywood story. The man who became a mogul himself. After, that is, his father-in-law decided he didn't want to have anything to do with a little thing called Gone with the Wind. Selznick thought better of the suggestion, and you know what that did for him. It didn't do so bad for Louis in the end either. He distributed the movie, which is why it still begins with Leo the Lion growling at anybody who could possibly have doubted its potential. The theme from Gone with the Wind, the one that Louis B. Mayer first allowed to get away, as he did his son-in-law, David O. Selznick. The man he wouldn't allow to escape his clutches was Irving Thalberg, the one they called the boy genius, the young man who married MGM star Norma Shearer, and until he died in his 30s was the brain behind practically everything that Louis B. Mayer and his studio did. He didn't always, however, share Mayer's philosophy, as veteran Hollywood writer Melville Shabelson told me.
It was around that time in the early 30s that the Writers Guild of America was being founded, or they were trying to found a union of writers which no one had ever tried before. And of course the producers, led by Louis Mayer, were up in arms about the whole thing. And Mayer did everything he could to try to prevent it. Actually, in one of Aldous Huxley's book, he has Mayer as a character, and in the book, he's reported to have denied Jesus Christ a pay raise. So you can imagine what was going on between him and the folks who were trying to start the Writers Guild in Hollywood. Actually, the producers tried to form a rival union called the Playwrights Union to defeat the real founders of the Writers Guild and keep their salaries down, etc. Well, there was a big meeting of the producers in Hollywood while all of this fight was going on. And Louis Mayer sent the wonder boy, the wunderkind of MGM, Irving Thalberg, who was very young enough to be married to Norma Shearer for a number of years, a very bright man who handled a great many things. He got up in front of the meeting of the producers and he said, "We all know that the writer is the most important part of the making of a motion picture, and we must do everything in our power to keep him from finding out."
The arguments with the men who wrote the MGM scripts were not the only differences between Mayer and Thalberg. Listen now to John Douglas Ames, for years publicity director at Metro.
At first they worked in great harmony, but I think they were both very strong egos, and eventually they started to feud. It was quite understandable because Thalberg was the head of production. He actually produced the films, whereas Mayer was called the head of the studio. And I don't think either of them was quite sure exactly what their title was and which was responsible for the great success of MGM. Of course, Mayer was very nettled by the fact that most critics said that Thalberg was responsible. Thalberg was nettled because Mayer was in the title of the company itself and was considered the big boss.
It's easy enough to laugh at the moguls and their attitude to life. Here's one man who owed MGM a great debt. And because of Mr. Mayer and Mr. Thalberg, so did we. Groucho Marx.
I was in a building called the Thalberg Building. It was a building that was built to honor Irving Thalberg, who was our producer at MGM. And a woman backed into the elevator. And this woman was wearing a hat. I have nothing to do, I'm bored. So I take the back of the hat and I push it up. And I turn around and it's Greta Garbo, the biggest star in all of show business. I didn't know what to say. And finally I said, "I'm terribly sorry, but I thought you were a fellow I knew from Kansas City."
No matter how powerful those men were in shaping MGM as a studio that made quality movies, the one who more or less created the Hollywood musical was Gene Kelly. And he did it with a film called On the Town.
I think On the Town is dated. I think it's old-fashioned now because it's been done and redone. But before that, people didn't get out of real ships in a real Navy yard and come down the New York streets and sing and dance. And don't forget, this was before the Nouvelle Vague in France, and I think it changed musicals. And we were young and silly enough to take chances like that.
There's not much to tell about my hometown. Life is easy and the tempo slow. But if you really want to find what's in it, you'll learn in a minute all you have to know. Let's go. Come walking with me. I want you to see our Main Street. You'll know the whole town by just walking down our Main Street. There's the corner where the boys hang out. As each girl goes by, they rate her, whistle, and try to date her later. Baby, are you going steady? And then we can stop and chat with a cop on Main Street. He made an arrest way back in 1903. He'll ask me who is the pretty stranger, how proud I'm gonna be when you walk down Main Street with me.
A number from On the Town. Singing in the Rain, though, was the one that probably is the best loved of all those musicals. You saw it in the evening and woke up the following day with a smile on your face.
All I do the whole night through is dream of you. And with the dawn I still go on dreaming of you. You're every thought, you're everything, you're every song I ever sing. Summer, winter, autumn, and spring. And were there more than 24 hours a day, they'd be spent in sweet content, dreaming away. Skies are gray, skies are blue, morning, noon, and nighttime too. All I do the whole day through is dream of you.
I co-directed it with Stanley Donen, and we were given complete license by the studio, and I think it'll stand up for a long time because it was the first camp film. You know, the word wasn't even used then. And the writers, Comden and Green, drew a lot of their own experiences as performing people when I was working with them as a performer. So we were a great little group, and we worked so well together. I really look on it very affectionately.
And then there was An American in Paris.
Rhythm, music, my gal who could ask for anything more. Daisies in green pastures, my gal who could ask for anything more. Old man trouble, I don't mind him, you won't find him round my door. Vous comprenez ça?
Non! I got
Rhythm,
I got
music,
I got
my gal. Who could ask for anything more? Who could ask for anything more? La même chose en français.
American in Paris made a contribution by showing that a dance routine could last longer than a minute and a half or 3 minutes, and we did a whole ballet in American in Paris. I think that was good. It wasn't a ballet picture. It was a picture about an American painter. And, well, we were very fortunate also in having all the help. And don't forget, we had fellows like Manelli around there working with me and beside me, and all the great people who were at MGM at the time. Solly Chaplin on the music, you know, Roger Eden's unsung heroes.
Who could ask for anything more? Who could ask for anything more?
You can't help the feeling that being at MGM was always something of an obstacle course. Actors and directors loved the studio. There weren't that many who liked Mr. Mayer, let alone loved him. Take Joseph Mankiewicz, who worked at MGM as a director and writer and wanted to be a producer. He told Louis B. Mayer of his ambition. Mayer wanted more than just good producing. He demanded obedience. Before you can run, you have to crawl, the mogul told him. Mankiewicz had to take that injunction to heart, in both of its possible meanings.
Louis B. Mayer, in many ways, one of the most dreadful human beings that ever lived. I've seen him do awful things. I saw him literally drop to the floor as if he were having a heart attack when he was trying to get Myrna Loy to play a part she didn't want to play. And the studio doctor was summoned, and they stretched him out on a couch, and Dr. Jones said to everybody, get out, get out. And Myrna, who was trembling, said, well, doctor, do you think I could have done this by refusing to play this part? Because by and large, actors didn't refuse to play parts. Everybody forgets that Clark Gable and Joan Crawford did 4 bloody films a year. His eyelids sort of fluttered on the couch, and he looked up at Myrna, and he said, Myrna, come closer. He said, Myrna, look, there's after all only so much a human being can ask of another human being. You don't want to do the part. You have your reasons for doing the part. I have my reasons why it's a matter of survival. But the studio, if you do the Myrna, look, it isn't worth this. Don't do the part, Myrna. She said, no, God, please help me. I'll do the part. He said, no. You're only doing the part because I'm sick, that's all. You're not doing the part because you... She said, no, LB, I want to do the part. Please let me do the part. And LB said, well, Myrna, if you really feel you can, you want to do the part, you know. And she said, yes, anything. I'll do the part. I want to do it. And Myrna, almost in tears, left the office, and the door was hardly closed, and he jumped to his feet. And he said to his secretary, Ida Coleman, all right, who's next out there?
But frequently, confrontations with Louis B. Mayer meant that it was not he who ended up on the floor. John Douglas Ames.
Mayer had a liking for fisticuffs, and if he was angry with anyone in his office, he thought nothing of running around his desk and socking the person on the jaw. He did this with John Gilbert, who was taking to the bottle, mumbled something about the loose morals of his own mother. This inflamed Mayer, to whom motherhood was absolutely sacred, and he immediately raced round his desk and floored Gilbert with one blow.
It seems that, as with so many others, alcohol and Louis B. Mayer was always a combination likely to present problems. But Louis B. Mayer's solution to those problems was, shall we say, very unconventional, horribly unconventional. This is his biographer, Charles Hyam.
Clark Gable, who drank heavily and was just beginning really at MGM in 1933, got drunk and driving off North Crescent Heights onto Sunset Boulevard, hit over a woman pedestrian, an African-American woman carrying a baby, and killed her. The death of mother and infant was so atrocious that Louis B. Mayer had to do a few rather drastic moves. One was he called in one of his lesser middle-level executives who was rather shaky in terms of his performance at the studio and said to this man, You will have a guaranteed life income, whether or not the studio survives. You will always have a life income. That will be secure for life. You'll never, ever want for money. And you will have permanent employment with us until the day I die. If you will go to prison for Clark Gable and say that you killed this woman. And he did. The understanding also was that Louis B. Mayer called in his friends, the Chandlers, who ran the LA Times, and indeed the owners of all the other newspapers, including, he got hold of William Randolph Hearst, for example, and said to them, this is the deal we're making, please play ball, I'll do this and that for you, I'll give you anything you want, but don't print this, and they didn't. That was the power he had. And $1 million went into the pocket of the then district attorney in return for the removal of the docket of Clark Gable and the replacement of a criminal docket of criminal negligence in driving of the other man. Now, here is an extraordinary element in the story. Clark Gable was asked to leave the studio and go to Palm Springs and wait for further orders. He was not allowed to do anything, but he must go and wait. Harry Cohn called up Louis B. Mayer and said, Robert Montgomery has dropped out of It Happened One Night. It's a small picture directed by a good man, Frank Capra, whom Mayer knew, of course, who was at the same club. We need an actor to take over. Who have you got? He didn't have anyone. They were all working except one, Clark Gable. He said, well, if you wouldn't mind Clark Gable with his terrible jug ears, he's not very romantic and he's not very good looking, but he has a good body and maybe the fans, women will go crazy. So he said to Harry Cohn, what does Clark Gable have to do in the picture? He said he only has to do one thing, and that's take his shirt off. He said he's made, it'll do it. So he went over there, and It Happened One Night became, by far, until Gone with the Wind, the most famous film of Clark Gable. So like a large cat, he landed firmly on his shaky feet.
Charles Hyam, Louis B. Mayer's biographer, talking about the movie mogul who liked to give the impression that life was just a party.
I have heard among this clan you are called a forgotten man.
Is that what they're saying? Well, did you ever? What a swell party this is.
And have you heard the story of a boy, a girl, unrequited love?
Sounds like pure soap opera.
I may cry.
Tune in tomorrow. What a swell party this is. What frails, what frocks,
what broads,
what furs, what rocks.
They're beautiful.
Oh, I've never seen such gaiety.
Neither do I.
It's all just too exquisite, really.
This French champagne,
domestic,
so good for the brain. That's what I was gonna say.
You know, you're a brilliant fellow.
Thank you.
Drink up, Jack. Please don't eat that glass, my friend. Have you heard about dear Blanche? Got run down by an avalanche.
No.
Don't worry, she's a game girl, you know. Got up and finished fourth.
This kid's got guts.
Having a nice time? Grab a line.
Have you heard that Mimsy Star?
What now?
She got pinched in the Astor bar.
Sauced again, eh?
She was stoned.
Well, did you ever?
Never.
What a swell party this is.
It's great.
Oh, it's great.
It's grand.
So grand.
It's wonderland. La 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 la
dum bum bum.
la 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 la. We sing
So rare.
so rare.
Like old camembert. Like
Don't dig that kind of crooning, chum. Have you heard it's in the stars? Next July we collide with Mars. Well, did you
ever? What a swell party, a swell party, a swelligan, elegant party this is.
One of the classic numbers from High Society, the MGM musical based on Joseph Mankiewicz's Philadelphia Story. The Hollywood story, of course, was always that much more interesting. To people living and working in Hollywood, however, it was a story they wanted to keep to themselves, unless publicity, the lifeblood of the industry, was specifically aimed at selling their products. When, for instance, Billy Wilder made Sunset Boulevard for the rival Paramount Studios, Louis B. Mayer was beside himself.
I remember one time I finished a picture called Sunset Boulevard. And there was a lot of talk about it, and there was one showing for the industry in the big theater at Paramount, on the Paramount lot. And it was a really kind of fine experience because it went great and people were very enthusiastic. Except I was walking down, and not just down the few steps there from the projection room, it was milling with people who were all over me, and Swanson was there, and the actresses were kissing the hem of her skirt, and to Christ, it was a triumph. Except there was one little group down there, and that was Mr. Louis B. Mayer with his henchmen. All the people, you know, around him, the staff of Napoleon. And he was furious. I could overhear with one ear. He says, "This is the most disgraceful thing to do to Hollywood. Biting the hand that is feeding you." And he went on, and this man didn't really know my name, but feeling great and elated and already on top. And I just went up to him and says, "Mr. Mayer, my name is Billy Wilder. I'm the director of this picture, and why don't you go and yourself?" And the people around him, they thought I thought they're gonna faint, you know, that a man would dare to say that to Louis B. Mayer, the mogul of moguls.
Louis B. Mayer survived what he thought was the onslaught of negative publicity that came in the wake of Sunset Boulevard. He survived the McCarthy era too, by pandering to the red-bashing senator and his Un-American Activities Committee and showing just how very American he himself was. He was, after all, the highest-paid executive in the United States. But there was one problem he may not have thought of. He didn't control all the shares in what he thought of as his company, his family. And one day he brought out his handkerchief and sniffed into it once more. Only this time the tears were real. He himself had been fired in a boardroom coup. Louis B. Mayer died in 1957. His legacy? Pretty well the same as that of the other Hollywood moguls. Melville Shaverson again.
I knew the old pirates of Hollywood because I worked for them, and they deserved the pirate title, but over the years I've come to recognize what they contributed sanity in the insane asylum that was known as Hollywood.
But perhaps it was the eminent director Frank Capra who best summed up for me the men and their era.
They were gamblers, of course, as they had to be, and they could take success or failure. That's why most of them were Jewish. They had the guts and the determination and the gambling ability and the ability to take it, the ability to survive.
An ability to survive. And through that ability, a few million people survived an otherwise pretty dreadful world. For, above all, what the men who made Hollywood and their movies gave us was entertainment. Thank you for being with me these last 4 weeks. I'm Michael Friedland. And by the way, you can join me on Friday for the first of a new Hollywood series, Jolson Sings Again. Good night. The Men Who Made Hollywood was written and presented by me, Michael Friedland. Our Hollywood correspondent is Barbara Paskin. And Neil Rosser, the producer.
and hit, we're a hit, and we'll go on from there. We played a charade that was lighter than air. A good old-fashioned affair. As we sing this finale, we hope it was up your alley. No death, like you get in Macbeth, no ordeal. Like the end of Camille, this goodbye brings a tear to the eye. The world is a stage, the stage is a world of entertainment.
88 to 91 FM, this is Radio 2 from the BBC.